After e4, c5, knight f3, knight c6, black's playing classical Sicilian, bishop e5, we're playing Rossolimo. In this video we're going to go through all the things we didn't go through yet of the g6 line. So g6 by black, we castle, bishop g7 in fianchetto, and we take the knight. So the two options here are either b takes or d takes. Let's start with d takes. This is the main move. So a4, and now we're going to look deeply into this move, a5. We have seen it in the past, but we got to complete our understanding of this. So let's move on. d3, as we know. And now let's start with this move, bishop g4. We've only seen a little bit of this. Let's just go through one more line with some ideas being explored. So after h3, as we know, bishop takes and queen takes. And now, in the past we went through e5. Now we're going to go through e6. We've never seen this before. How to deal with this type of structure? Okay, develop the knight in a3. And after black develops the knight in e7, with the idea of castling, you play queen to g3. And after castle, rook to b1. This is the setup, the official setup you need to use to face this main line classical Sicilian. Let's understand the ideas. Okay, black, I don't know, black will have to make a move. Can't really move the knight anywhere that makes sense. So let's look at this move. Let's say rook e8, for instance. Now, you might be wondering about the f5 move, but this move is actually wrong. It just doesn't do anything. Because you're going to go on with the usual plan that we're about to describe, which is bishop e3, putting pressure on this pawn, and then knight c4, finalizing the pressure on b6 with b4. You're going to see all of this now. So let's say black plays b6, which is obviously going to happen, and I play knight c4, the usual move. If black takes you, right, okay, pushing is not possible in this position. Pushing is not possible because he can just take, or double attack on it. Knight c4 also stops e5 from happening. And if the pawn takes, you just take back. The position is evaluated +3. Of course, it's inevitable to play rook b to d1, infiltrate on the on the 7th rank. You also got pressure on these two squares, and the game would play itself. We're not gonna see this line because I'm about to explain the ideas of how to beat the Rossolimo, how to beat the classical Sicilian with g6 when they played this bishop g4 early move and e6. So now let's look at this move, rook e8. And now here's the plan. This is how it will be. Bishop e3, putting pressure on c5. This is defended with b6. And now, well, let's make a point here. A move like bishop d4, in case our opponent wants to deflect from the obviously the strong, inevitable plan, is met with knight to c4. And it is not convenient for our opponent to take this bishop because he will be depriving himself of the dark square bishop in this type of game. That's really not good. The thing is, remember this, the e6 pawn and the e4 pawn penalize the black knight. This knight just can't go anywhere that makes sense. And a move like, let's say, if bishop takes, you take back with the pawn, this knight isn't going anywhere. The idea is to play knight d6. If you get to play knight d6, position evaluated over +3 already. Black apparently can only stop it with knight to c8. But now you play rook to f3. The idea is simply doubling up and hit the f7 pawn. And obviously f5 is very weakening. So let's finally move on to where we need to look at to understand all the plans available. So in this position, after bishop to e3, b6 is the usual move they play. If you have faced the classical with classical Sicilian with g6 and played the Rossolimo, you have met this pawn structure a million times. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Knight to c4 comes now, and this is how you simply win the game. And that's why the position has been evaluated +1 and over for quite a while. It's just a forcefully won game. So here's the thing. Let's say now if black plays knight to c8 to prevent knight d6, right? h4, and you're gonna play h5. If black plays h5, knight to e5. You're attacking here, you're putting pressure here in g6. And we're not gonna look at this line because black is just paralyzed. It's a very ugly position to play. Black can still hold things together for a bit. Queen c7, for example, double attack on the knight and protecting everything. You play f4. And now black's best idea would be to maybe take this knight and take back the pawn, but it gets really ugly. There are no moves that our opponent can make if you think about it. There's nothing here because this knight will never have access anywhere that makes sense. Knight to d6. Maybe with the idea of playing f5, you play queen to f3. with a very simple idea. Exploit the closed center to play the move g4. And after taking and opening the file on the king, position evaluated plus 2.50 at this point. If you get to play this plan, you'll have to take the game from there. We're actually going to continue now from where we left. So here, after knight to c4, instead of the plan knight to c8 to stop knight d6 from happening, what about rook to e7, which is a move the computer comes up with. Okay, rook b to e1, rook to d7 now. Rooks are this in a very close and ugly game for black. At least this is the best you can possibly do, but black doesn't really have any freedom. f4 comes now. If a move like b5 comes, you just play knight to e5, and it's fantastic position for white. It's just overwhelmingly. Bishop to d4 now, because white is threatening to play b4, and you will see that soon enough. Take, and now f5. Okay, take, and now knight is taking is not possible, because then you can take the knight, well, afterwards, after a trade of rooks. So let's say knight to d5, for example, you take, and now you take, and look, it's just completely winning for white here. You're gonna have to finish this game off by yourself. But let's explore something else now, so we can still, and the plan are going to be very similar now. So in this variation with g6 castle, bishop g7 take, d takes, a4 is the main move, a5 is the main move, d3, and now in the variation with e5, which is the serious variation, right? This is the best. e6 I only mentioned it briefly just to know everything, but e5 is the more important one to study. Bishop e3, and now b6 comes to protect that pawn, and we play knight e3. So it's pretty much the same stuff. The difference is that this knight will not be as weak as it was before. But let's see, actually, two moves we're going to look at: knight to e7 now, or bishop to a6. I've encountered both of them plenty of times, so we need to discuss both. Knight to e7, we play knight to c4, and now three options very quickly. One of them is queen to c7, which is the main move in this position, because you see, if black castles, you just knight c takes in e5. It's just a free central pawn. There's no compensation, so there's no point. Another move that is quite typical here is f6. I've encountered this, and I personally really dislike playing against this move because it's very solid. It's one of the main moves, one of the most played moves in this position, and I never know what to do against it. b4. And basically now, what to do? Well, obviously there's double attack on this pawn c5, so our opponent will say, let's say takes, but like if they take with the c pawn, and then you go an attack on this pawn, and then you're going to attack on this pawn, you're going to produce a pass pawn, win material. So what if a takes in b4? Everybody's thinking about this move. That makes perfect sense. a5. So we're going to open the files. Okay, now, well, obviously we're threatening to, once we take this pawn in b6, we'll be defended by the knight, and everything in this pawn chain that looks big and solid will fall apart. So when black takes us, take back in c5, and black says, you know, we'll play for material. Okay, bishop e6, developing and try to take this monster of a knight. Too late. Okay, you might argue, what about castling? Well, position is much better for white. If they castle, take the pawn for free in b4, can't be taken back because of the rook pin, and bishop e6 attacking this tremendous knight, then you take this pawn as well. So that just fell apart completely. And when the queen moves away, then you can play knight f2 d2 to obviously prevent bishop taking in c4, damaging the pawn structure seriously. So knight f2 d2 to protect that knight, and yeah, you'll have to take it from here. It's position evaluated over +2. So obviously let's drop the line here, and let's keep seeing more and more plans so that you're comfortable in every situation. Here in this position, we just went through castling. What about bishop to e6, immediately attacking this knight? You take advantage of it with check. And when they move the king, d4. And you take in the center. This is just too late now to do anything. If pawn takes, knight takes back, attacking this bishop, threatening the end of the world. Queen to d7, c3. I love it how we keep giving pawns away. Pawn takes in c3, rook to b1. completely careless. Now we're threatening rook to b7, and that's unstoppable. Bishop to f7, removing itself from this square, because you see we're threatening rook b7, and then when the queen moves away, then we can take the bishop for free. Bishop f7. But you're still gonna go there, then you're gonna play queen to d8, and then you're gonna take this one, and then they're gonna take back, and then you've got double attack here. So let's go back here in this position. After d4, we just went through pawn takes. What if black plays this move, h6? Just a random move to show you. Well, basically there could be an idea of playing king to h7 eventually, but just a random move to show what the plan is. So if they don't take you, you take them. And when takes back, knight to b7 is the best move. It's attacking the queen, and obviously we're putting pinning that knight. And it's not like, you know, if the the queen moves away, right? You can just take this pawn. It looks like a free knight, but after take, now queen to d6 ends the game. Because you're attacking here, black will have to protect that, but then you're also attacking here. So back in this position after knight b7, you might say, okay, what about swapping queens? Okay, rook f takes back, and now, okay, if black plays, I don't know, king f7 to unpin the knight, whatever, you just take this pawn, and all of these pawns, the c6, the b4 pawn, they're all falling apart, all of them. So what if instead of that, king f7, let's say black plays a4, right? It seems very logical. Okay, knight to d8 is such a nice move. It's attacking the bishop. The bishop moves, bishop g4 looks reasonable, but we're completely winning. Knight to c6. Now double attack on the knight is pinned. The rook can't move away because you're going to attack on a4. What about bishop f6? Rook to d6. Completing the masterpiece. This is, by the way, black having played only engine best moves in order to resist in a faulty variation. King to g7 to defend everything, but now you just take the bishop. Hehe. King takes back, and now you take this one with check, and then king moves, and now you take this one, and you're gonna have to take it from here. You're gonna attack here, you got an attack here. It's completely winning for white. You'll take the game from here, and let's move on. So let's make a quick recap, because we need to look at the main move in that position, which is queen c7, obviously. Bishop g7, take, a4, a5, d3. The variation with a5, okay, bishop e3, b6, and now knight a3, the crucial move. So, knight e7, knight to c4, we're going to attack on this pawn, and as we said, we can't really be defended properly. What about queen to c7, right? This is the main move, everybody knows this. This is what the Sicilian players will play. So let's understand how to exploit this. The move is b4. Should I do hehe? I think I did it before already, but hehe. b4 is the move that changed entirely my approach against the Sicilian, classical Sicilian. I kept losing to this variation. Now I just don't lose anymore because my opponent is thinking for half an hour when they have to play now, and no matter what they do, it's wrong. But the position is really much better after c takes because of bishop takes in b6. When the queen moves away, bishop back in c5. Black loses the right to castle basically in this position, and it's just horrible. Besides, you're threatening knight to d6 as well. It's just completely winning. Let's drop it there. So in this position, c takes is wrong. Obviously, if black just castle, then you just win this pawn for free and you isolate the pawns. It's so much better. If instead a takes, well, now if a5. So I recognize the patterns. Pawn takes, and now bishop takes in here. Looks like now it is possible to castle, but actually you take the pawn in b4. Recognize the pattern. So what about rook to a6? Now the rook is no longer, the pawn is no longer pinned. What's going on? Too late. Knight to d6 is now possible. Check. King moves to f8, the only square. c3 comes now. See, these moves repeat themselves. Pawn takes because otherwise we would have taken. Knight to g5 comes now, finalizing the attack in f7. It's too late to do anything. Bishop e6 appears to be maybe helping, but you just take. Queen to f3 check, and we're winning just too much material. One last thing that needs to be seen in this position, you might be thinking, after playing b4, what if black just plays b5 to kick our knight away? Okay, Well, we take this pawn and it's free. You might say, okay, well, what about pawn takes here now? Doesn't that help? Knight back to b3. And after the pawn takes in a4, it looks like we're not doing okay. These 3 pawns have survived. Black has a passed pawn. It's attacking the knight. So what's really going on here? Queen d2 comes now. Obviously, the pawn can't take the knight without losing the exchange. There's no compensation. A move like bishop to b7, protecting the rook, developing the bishop, is met simply with knight c5. And you're going to trade the knight for that bishop. Besides, you're also attacking b4, and you should be winning that pawn as well. It's a winning position, so we're going to leave it there. Let's look at this one instead. Castle. Now we take this pawn. And let's say the bishop moves, knight to c5. So this is a transposition of what would have happened before if we had continued the bishop b7 line. Bishop b7, knight c5, black castles, and then you take in b4. So you might wonder, rook f to b8. Seems like a good move. Allows the development of the other rook. Doesn't lose the pawn in a4. Well, yes, we are going to take. There are no bad discovered checks. It was unstoppable for us to take that pawn. A move like bishop c8 is met with queen to a3. Simple as that. Simplifying, and you're winning this endgame. A move like bishop to a6, kind of the same thing. You just play queen a3 is the best move. So from the start, classical Sicilian. G6, castle, bishop G7, take, pawn takes, the D pawn, and now A4, A5, D3, E5 by black, bishop E3, B6, these are all main moves, knight to A3, this is part of our plan. Let's look at this move which I encountered recently and I found quite annoying, bishop to A6, kind of pinning this pawn, the idea of playing C4 later, and just also finding a good place to put that bishop. And now, I mean, also it has to be said that in this position, I mean, here, bishop g4 would be a transposition from one of the other lines. Because then, you know, you can play h3, take, then, yes, we've seen it already. So here you play queen d2, and now knight to e7. What about knight to f6? This is not good, because now that allows you to play bishop h6 straight away. You're winning that bishop no matter what. I mean, you're swapping with that bishop. And black dark squares are weak, and this bishop is not going to be very good. So, if take, you might ask, what about... Well, knight to g4 attacking the queen doesn't work, because queen to g7 attacks the rook. And also, double attack on this pawn now, so that's going to be it. When the rook moves, you can take the pawn in e5. It's really not good. So let's not look at this. After queen h6, what about queen to e7? Developing ready maybe to castle long. Knight to d2. Castle. The thing is, what needs to be understood about this position is the f7 is very weak. This knight doesn't have any good place to go. After castle you play f4, knight to g4 attacking the knight, just to make an example, queen to g5. Believe it or not, this is the best move, because after the trades, take, the pawn in g5 will be controlling f6, and then you're putting pressure on the square, not to mention that the knight is under threat of being trapped. So what if our opponent declines? Okay, queen to d7, attack the knight, that's it. Knight to e3, only move, rook to f2, and the knight is basically trapped. We're not attacking it, but if we take this pawn, then we are. What about pawn takes in f4? Seems reasonable. Take. And after queen to d4, protecting the knight, the only possible way, play knight to b3, and that should do the job. So back in this position, instead of knight to f6, what about knight to e7? This seems more reasonable. But you're still going to play bishop h6. The plan remains. However, now black at least can castle. Okay, take. How to exploit this? We take this pawn. Simple as that. Queen to d4 now seems to be doing the fork and recapturing the material. However, knight a goes to c4 and everything is protected. You might say, okay, f6 attacks the knight, knight to f3. Queen to d8. That's it. Queen to c3 comes now. The queen is in her best square in there. And let's make an example. A move like b5 cannot really be played because knight takes a5 is just completely free. Instead, king to g8. I'm pinning the pawn. Trying to find some safety, but rook f2 e1, and you know exactly where this is going. f5 by black is a typical idea. They obviously want you to take, but you play queen to b3. The king is in trouble. King to h8, removing itself from horrible discover checks. You take this pawn. That pawn was going to fall no matter what. It's crazy though, because it looks like black can pin the knight. Why would we pin our own piece? Because check. That's why. King to g8. The knight goes back to c4, and is double attack now on a5. You can take it from here. If they take, you take back with the check, and you're playing against very weak structure.